everybody. My name is Margaret Ross. I teach in creative writing here, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the New Voices in Poetry Reading with Wendy Zhu and Yazid Brito-Million. Thank you so much for coming out on this hellish evening. And thank you most of all to Starsha Gill, whose hard work and singular finesse is what made tonight happen. Wendy Zhu's most recent book is The Past, published in 2021 by Wesleyan University Press. In it, a poem entitled Why Write ends with these lines: I am not writing to photograph the past. I am writing to sit inside the pauses of Uncle's sentences, the commas of the dead, the stormless harbor where Uncle rests his head. A poem aimed at photographing the past might attempt to frame a scene or fix a picture in language, but Zhu's poems are more honest than a camera. They see clearly enough to perceive blur and specter, to record present absence and multiple narratives. They understand silence isn't negative space, but a palpable landscape where a poet might linger, sitting in pauses or looking beneath the sentence's wing to attend to the person behind the syntax, the particular music of their breath, the unexpected rhyme, the commas of the dead. Zhu creates not a photograph, but a somatic experience of the past, an immersed and immersive record. Events of previous years are present to the senses via echo and slant rhyme and recurring image. Thus, the poet's immigration to the U.S. as a baby 3 days before the events of June 4th, 1989 in Tiananmen Square continues to configure private and public life. Thus, the past's stanzas fuse the near and the distant, the massive and the tiny, the carnal and the cosmic, as one of the speaker's many selves describes it. When time coughed me up, naked and dazzling, I was hungry for nectarines and heavy cream, fish heads in broth, sprouted white beans, while up from here, past a cool, starry nothingness, infallible satellites roaming in description. Together, the poems of the past present an intricate temporality opposed to that American model of linear time, which upholds white supremacy by disavowing the past. They reject the violent strategic amnesia branded as American optimism. And in so doing, the past extends the rigorous and visionary approach to form that characterizes Zhu's earlier books as well. In Zhu's work, poetic form is never purely intellectual or aesthetic, but existential and political. Form enacts a possible structure of relation, sustains or resists varieties of coherence and dissonance, and excavates alternate sense-making. Zhu's previous collections include Phrasis from Fence, which was named one of the 10 best poetry books of 2017 by the New York Times, and You Are Not Dead from the Cleveland State University Poetry Center, which was named by Poets and Writers magazine as one of 2013's top 10 debuts. Zhu was awarded the Patricia Goediek Prize in Poetry in 2011 and a Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation in 2014. Her work has appeared in the Best American Poetry, Granta, Tin House, Poetry, The New Republic, Plowshares, Conjunctions, and widely elsewhere. Born in Shandong, China, she holds an MFA from the Program for Poets and Writers at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She has been on creative writing faculty at the MFA program in creative writing at Columbia University and New York University, and is currently assistant professor of writing at the New School in New York City. She lives in Brooklyn and serves as poetry editor for the arts magazine Hyperallergic. Please join me in welcoming Wendy Zhu.
Hello, part two. I'm just starting my timer. Thank you all for coming. I think I already said that, but really, like, I was outside. I had to go outside to get here, so it means a lot to me. You could be doing anything. So before I start, also thank you, Margaret, for like an introduction that I would like to marinate in for a while. I don't have time, but it means a lot to me. And Starsha, also, wherever you are, thank you so much. If people knew, like, right, like, you know, the emails that make things possible, like the back end stuff, I just like really, really appreciate you. And you make all this possible. You made a lot of this possible. So I'm going to read from the past for a little bit, and then I'll read some new work. But before I do either of those things, I'm going to read from a newer piece called Mignon. That's sort of like a poem annotation of the past. I won't say too much, except to explain that Chinese parents, this is the only context I'm going to give. Chinese parents, when you get a mosquito bite, you like press your fingernail into, other cultures do this too, and then you rub cut garlic on it. And so then your baby like toddles around for the rest of the day smelling sort of delicious if you love that smell, or just like repugnant to other children and people. But that's what you do for mosquito bites, and it works, but I can't bring myself to do it as an adult. It doesn't seem useful. So this is a new piece called Mignon. For fear of being discovered as one who writes poor, who writes bad, who writes lines so sentimental and excessively familiar that she would be laughed out of the institutions and lands where she resides. Probably for the best. Death to the institutions that made me, long live the me that was made. When I was a child, I couldn't descend from the top of the metal slide to the bottom. Didn't even need to walk, could have just slid down on my butt without keeping my mother in my line of sight. I enter the slide and immediately begin to cry, sliding and my skin burning a little on the back of my legs until I emerge from beneath the orange plastic down below, run to grab my mother's leg. She'd congratulate me and pinch my mosquito bites, and when we arrived home, rub cut garlic halves on them, making me feel like a soft, little loved filet, little mignon, my mother's little meat dish, whose personality would not come out without some coaxing. And maybe she didn't have one to begin with that was not simply fear of living without my mother. Little soft meat that sits beside me at the desk, kicking legs in the air, one foot resting sometimes on the cat, and it bothers her, little mignon, with no personality until she found some pages to listen to the turnings of the planet in her mind. But other things too are the past, are you between you and it. Mothers become mothers when nobody wants them to be anything else, I thought to myself. And if it's not true, I'd never know, sitting against the window and nodding off into a dream. What do I mean by the past? I meant the essential non-future that I live inside, the suspended forever that could never be the present, the alchemy of time constantly trying to leave me when I catch up to anything I am already in my own past. It and its own evaporation, of course. I also meant specific disgraces and personal sorrows. Isn't that what you meant too? When I look at you, I see that we were born on different continents. The soil that someone walked on to carry you home from the hospital was chemically different. We're chemically different because of air, the pathogens that circulate in us like language, some toxic and some something else. Definitely something else is keeping you alive than me, but I can't quite see what it is. Writing, then, is the most embarrassing of all embarrassments, making work out of all other things, the past embarrassing the future. In my pathogen, we say, 骑虎难下, or you're riding that tiger now and it would be dangerous to dismount. How could you? As in, how could you stop now? And how could you, the wrongness of you having begun in the first place? You stubborn thing who writes. Why write about any of this? What's the point? Why, when Uncle died, would you begin again inside those memories of the onion soup? Uncle's shoulders jutting out in incompatible directions, the permanent yellow stain under his eyes. Why start? Why write? And all that came out was another poem. The beast must be ridden. How could you? Thank you. I love supportive snaps. They really mean a lot to me, so thank you. I'll read a little bit from the past now, and I'll start with a poem called Looking at My Father. Looking at my father. It's the inside which comes out. As I contemplate him there, half in sunlight, weeding diligently a Midwestern lawn. On my persons, I have only notes and a drying pen, the memory of onion blossoms scenting in a window. Reflection is my native medium. I am never arriving, only speaking briefly on material conditions between myself and others. My country inoculates me lovingly over time. My country grasps me like desire. I will show you my credentials, which is to say my vivid description if you ask. Here we are, my father and I, never hostile, a small offering. Pointless cut flowers appear on the kitchen table when one finally arrives into disposable income, still possible. Am I living? Do I accept revision as my Godhead and Savior? I do, and I am. And in the name of my Chinese father, now dragging the tools back inside, brow shining but always a grin, faithless except to protect whatever I still have time to become. Amen. That's the first time that I've gotten to read that poem in the Midwest. I'm from Iowa, and so it hits different in Chicago. I love it. It's great. Names of the river. I did wrong by all ideas of nation, haunted by the afterlife of speech, public acts wagging their dutiful tails. I sat down in the crosswinds of a feeling, too wild to write it out, how the Velcro parts of me unstuck themselves. But do you too, alone, ever feel incompetent? If in one hand holding a wet tissue for dignity, when the Yangtze view leaves you cold. Somewhere in America, a white boss in a dandelion dress shirt is raising his voice again. A quick pivot to the page where I stare down the verbs and am afraid to make a recitation of myself. Am I unimitable? Or is this just another feeling? By all accounts, the river was yellowed over time, a yoke running over land, and yet in places pearly foam, like clouds, like the overlook I might have photographed, sinewy green, and the snow-pricked thumb of that mountain. I've forgotten its name, under which nobody I still remember to call was born, in the days when they came and tried to take my mother away in a van to the county hospital for procedures against her will for the good of the population growing too fast because of dumb, ugly country folk like her. Had the day not been hot and mean, a government calling me home by a different word, I would have made a record of everything there flowing from the mouth of the river. The yellow and deep water, the big mouth, the 5 stars, the Tao. One reminding me now of the next, heavier than foreign air, their yellow names soaking the page. Thank you. I feel like what Margaret shared is such better context for my own book that I could ever contextualize, but maybe I'll add that I wrote most of this in the years leading up to the my 30-year anniversary in this country, which, if you can imagine, was like a very weird anniversary. And that anniversary has now come and gone, and it feels strange to me to kind of dip back into, you make a book and then people read it and you're like, oh yeah, that was me. But so I just really appreciate this very welcoming. Yeah. Okay, so I'll read. This poem is called A Dream of Shandong. Fog grasping concrete, some trees babbling into air. Why do I turn my head piously to the sky? Cranes of steel and smoke were opening their hungry beaks. Little sorrows arranged on the stovetop at home. Pills for grandfather, uncle's tank of air. Cords of dust travel mischievously into corners while I spin around on a rock of my own invention. A servant to the black and white cat that hooks into my shirt sleeve, her lavish ambivalence. I come here to think, to sit with uncle unbothered for a day in the shade of a maidenhair tree. Discouraging intention, like a brand new thing, nothing at all dark or lonesome when he wakes. I write my land-shy words to uncle, as soft as mute wind, sailing across the tops of his hair. Poem about my life. The opening to another country was always inside my father's mind, in many forms, in dreams, green swords swirling in a winter mist, colorful moths, sometimes a molar falling out, porcelain clattering onto the table like a single rung chime. When I come into the house, I am held by him, become a child again. The view from here seems never to change, but in wishing it over many years, I have changed it. A new worry is my father's more delicate footsteps, picking out a path to the bathroom sink at night, the hair beneath a gardening hat leaking its color. When the writing will not come, then I must go to the porch and listen there to the talking of one tree to its double, and think of my father, who used to say that living is not so painful as living would have you believe. When as a teenager I borrowed the rusted Nissan, drove it through a field, and returned it to him with sudden blue flowers tucked into its mouth. The bluest one he saved. The wind that made those dull trees sing, blowing in from the future, somewhere my father has never been. Thank you. So I'll read some newer work. You all seem like nice people, so that's the right time to try out new poems. And I won't say much about them. Thank you so much for listening. This is really wonderful. Absolute variations. The first time I read a line by John Ashbery was in a little cafe in Massachusetts. From left to right, there it was written across my friend's collarbone. It felt right to be there with someone who would show me something like that when we had never met before. In this country, it feels insane to accept our facts, to idly and without remorse on a Tuesday remember the meadow, if it's still there, trumpeting its tendrils. I wonder if that was a moral place, if the meadow has only relation to other objects without intention, without obfuscation from belief. The clot of orange there along the innermost edge of vision are tulips. If I ever have the chance to get up close again, form is not all there is, I wouldn't allow it, thought bubbles fogging up my screen. I remember my friend had a sort of ecstatic experience of pity there. He had recently lost his belief that he was doing the right thing. Half frozen out of himself with worry, evergreen in friendship, we watched the dogs go round the loop. Their tails like wheat, they ran and bobbed in time. Nobody, including myself, could feed my friend the correct answers, nor descend all the way there and back through reddish hell, just for him. Recently, my poems have increasingly been about hell. So if anybody knows what that's about, I would be interested in chatting with you afterwards. This is some sort of, if other poets are also writing about hell, that would mean something to me. So, Baba calls me on a Wednesday. Blottings of leaf against sky on your back playing with soil. Flowers are anchors, sky cuts through trees. Light now, its quality dancing in a pupil, stitching through leaf and dark. A story with wings at the start, a linear idea, white airplane belly pointed west. One country taught me to listen, one daughter listening. One leaf made to listen in wind trembles against the past. The endangered green of honeydew, clean air and sweet, one daughter memorizing numbers. Home like a rope will tie. Shaking how leaves listen, made to listen, little shock of dandruff shook loose, a puff of white on Baba's head. One country taught me the words, falling flower. Four drawings of flowers. I wish I had a visual aid now. Because these are real drawings. Ugh, next time, come to New York, we'll do another reading, it'll be great. Four drawings of flowers. Four drawings of flowers with their heads cut off, willful as flowers, appearing now as women, only to carry out from the frame a skein of silk cloth, to clear a cutting surface, to polish the marble inlay of his sword's grip. So many brocade squares in the pockets of women awaiting their day. You can hear now the folds of her taffeta dragging against itself. Scrape of a needle through eyelet. There she goes again, flowers at task. Four drawings of people in a Chinese funerary style, arranged themselves by depth of feeling, arranged again by country of residence, arranged by the artist at the family's request. Four drawings of insects. The belly of this one is liquid pearl, overlaid hectic green, crawling beneath my mother's foot early in the morning. As she pedals the sewing machine before work, where she'll sew something different for an American woman going on holiday to a country whose name is not worth remembering. Likewise, the beetle's name is its disguise, its head shape so pleasing to the eye. When we first came to this country in like '89, my mom got this job sewing clothes, and I just think about her a lot when I write, and I think about, so many of us have family members, right, that they didn't have time to become poets because they were working so that we could become you know what I'm trying to say. And I really felt that too in Yazud's work, yeah. The future. Wanting to go on with you, only you, living in this hut-like emotion, so close interior and anterior feeling held me beneath, a phrenic diagram where the mind in antiquity lived, distorted by history and usage, what trimmings fall away from the shearman's hand, not wool, not steel, cloth unbound. Anything at all can be cut and shortened. The relational binds of capitalization, just kidding, in the end of capitalization is where we're bound to meet. Bowed down, a streak of purple jelly on the table is like streak of dank oil on a haughty bird's wing, as in both came splashing forth from a factory, your mouth overflowing, SSBP overflowing, to wipe the visionary's mouth with a nasty handkerchief. He says, do it again. He puts his hand on the lever that brings forth internet for free. Forth connectivity spinning through the pigmented noodles. Jamais, jamais, jamais. I see it on the gleaming mantle as if placed there. Jamais that you may. That poem is also accurate to my understanding of how internet works and how we get internet, how it comes through something, noodles, I guess, and finds us. I'm going to close with two last poems. And again, I really appreciate you spending this time with us, with all of us. This is called Red or Orange. Echoes of words never thought, words from afar, you speaking through me, which I'd like just fine, something charting viscous but undeterred towards my head, the feeling that you're slipping out of your reality shoes, and the next thing to happen will be oh so bad. You try anemone, kingfisher, other words to heal your gut. The firefight that precedes an experience of real emotion is upon us, words thought, then simply swallowed. Make me want to exist a little longer with you. A colloquial style was at this time sounding pretty good, pretty good. A humble poem sounding off in the distance where I'm squinting for any traces of it. A pour of concrete takes 2 days to dry, and we're inconvenienced greatly by walking around the pit, tossing questions back and forth at one another. A semi-structure of hope, something kind of eerie and unproductive, like the feeling I have for you. A refusal to produce is its signature. A real bummer, a bad worker, a hair past 10 o'clock, and it's so muggy. There, of course, you are. Yeah, I started with a hell poem, and I'll end with a hell poem. Thank you for being here. This is called Morning. reading the words of a teacher who has moved on. An unsentimental perfume in the air. I'm speaking now as you forget to, the feeling equivalent of a stem cell magnetized to its twin. Reading poems that speak to the times, as thus charged to do, as there being nothing else to speak to, my own shame pipes and blows beneath my breastbone, demanding attention. A student spoke once to fear. Fear, I know you, said the student in recitation. You are for both the young and the old. I tried first to crush you in the tides of human thought, the whirlwind of knowledge, a junco bird whipping itself up in the Douglas firs, his dark forehead set feathered, swivels like a thought at tilt, in morning when the water slips off a line in the mountain's face. It makes of itself belief. It makes a thought obliterated. It coronates nothing, least of all more thoughts. It pecks at shame's banal authoritarianism, categorized as having a new world profile, easy to identify, hard to love. Hellish clouds of the mind lift. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. And do you think you guys would be up to take some questions? Yeah?
Let's make a co-decision.
Let's see if I can remove this mic from its holster. I don't know if I can. Oh, yeah, I can. Does anyone have a question?
Margaret, maybe people can project.
Okay, yeah. This is too intimidating. I'm going to put this back. Yeah, if you have a question, please just feel free to shout it out. Oh, yeah.
Just to break the silence. Who inspires you guys? Like either in your art or in your life?
Ooh, big question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who inspires me? Oh, so many people. I mean, I think for me it starts with my parents. It starts with my like long-suffering immigrant parents. Maybe maybe some of us in this room can relate. They're sort of like behind anything that I might write or do. Literally in the sense that they brought me here, but also the things that I have time to do are because they spent time doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that, I mean, I think my list of like teachers and like poets that I look up to is too long. But I studied at UMass Amherst, and like not every teacher leaves like a lifelong impression on someone. But I was lucky there to work with Peter Gizzi, who is like still like a friend and like he's like the most I'm like really inspired by his work. Yeah, and then it like changes by the week, like I'm wondering what you're reading, that's good, or like who you're reading, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I want to echo a lot of what you're saying. Gosh, I feel like I'm reading so many. My God.
This is a phenomenon. Like when people ask, like, is there a good movie I should see?
Yeah, wait.
It's nothing.
Yeah,
There's nothing in my head. It's totally okay.
I want to say I'm reading Jose Olivares's
Promise is
That's really good, and his like book Citizen Illegal also was like really, like I don't know, just a really formative and fun thing. I trying to think. Beneath the Blue Key with someone else who I thought was like just like no words, just amazing poet. There's God, yeah, the list is long.
I know.
But I feel the same way. I think this project wouldn't have really come about without thinking about, so when my dad was younger, he was in a band. Yeah, which was like not like very like contentious choice because he was also like he also like worked at a pizzeria and like, was also like working multiple was working multiple jobs, was also like a landscaper, and then just like took up this hobby and learned like how to play the keyboard in like New York. We lived in New Jersey growing up. So I feel like he definitely kind of planted a seed of just like music and like that kind of more accessible like art being in my life and stuff. And my mom's like a dancer when she sings.
And I hear the music when you read it. I feel like we all heard it, right? Like I hear that like, it's like you could see it. I wish I could map it, but I hear the cadence and the musicality of it, which you can't say about everybody, it's just like, it was really exciting to hear.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for that question.
First of all, thank you so much for your poetry. It's been phenomenal to hear. One thing I'm curious is like, what subject matter has been the hardest for you to write about and why?
That's a great question. Oh my God, all of it. No. Actually, I have a very specific answer. I think for me, telling my own stories about immigration has been actually like, not easy, but I feel, I lived it. So I feel like it's there in my hand and maybe I just have to, find the right, what is it, immigrant metaphor of choice? I just gotta find the right immigrant metaphor of my choice, and the right language and the right description. All of that comes a lot easier than when I want to put down in writing these stories of like parents, elders, right, like family members that I'm not really that close to. Like I know the story, right, but I'm not them. And there's always that question of like, how do I do this right? How do I write this at all? And also I think that the main one would be, am I aestheticizing, right? A kind of experience that, not even like, that that I don't have a right to sort of put into writing, but does it need to be aestheticized, right? I think it's like politically that's a good question to ask. It's like, are immigrant stories only sort of tolerable when they're, they get the like Hollywood treatment and they're like gorgeous and maybe they get turned into musicals or something, What if I said it plain? What if I said it hard? What if I said it, I would say that's like maybe the most specific challenge for me. I wonder if it's similar to you.
Yeah, definitely. That was like one of the, I kept telling people, I was like, wow, I feel like this is like exactly what I was trying not to write about for a really long time. Or like the kind of writing or work that you just like so do not want to engage with. And so I feel like, and I think for like similar, if not the same reasons of like, that question was aestheticizing, but then also the kind of, I feel like I was struggling a lot with writing this collection because I was like, just kind of thinking about how, like, thinking about things like the kind of iconic, like, mango poem, or like these kind of diaspora poems.
Yeah, these tropes.
Yeah, these tropes that are like, okay, but like, I like my grandpa did, like, give me references. Like there's like trying to find the truth without like having to recreate the same thing. And I feel like also your voice, I feel like is so uniquely you, which I just like love. But yeah, and just like trying to find that is like very, very difficult.
You're really putting your finger on it, right? Because what do you do as a writer when the trope is true to life, to your life, right? And then you're like, oh no, but yeah, then you have to find a way around it. But that's a lifelong question and a good one too. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Hi. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. Susie, particularly, I think your poem about riding the 55 on the way from Midway like brought me to tears.
Oh, crazy!
And following up on on what you said about the struggle of writing poems, I wanted to ask to both of you, how do you go about sort of bringing a world of experience into the form of a poem? When is the poem finished for you? Do you ever have to rewrite it? How many times do you have to rewrite it? Yeah.
Oh God. I'm laughing because I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. Nah, there's nothing funny about the question. I'm
No, you're
I'm
just
laughing
so
because
right.
I'm like, oh my God. I think it's a really good question. Oh, I don't know. I think I'd be interested to hear how Yuzu's answer too. I think that maybe the short answer is that I tend to kind of write lived experience until what was once like interesting and weird to me about the experience begins to actually be kind of boring to me. And that to me means that something about like the unknowability, right? Or some of like the kind of potential or excitement about like what I didn't understand emotionally, right, at the time about that experience has been worked out, like thank God, has been worked out in the poem. In like I went into the poem as like a space, and the poem helped me see like maybe what was once so mysterious about that lived experience, like you say, was actually like, oh, so for me, I have this weird, I've sort of always been like this. I actually find it really nice and welcome when I get bored with my own poem. Sometimes that's draft 3, and I'm like, all right, cool. Only took 3. Sometimes that's like years and years later. Sometimes that's the first draft. I like put it down, and I'm like, okay. I feel like I understand kind of emotionally what was going on there. So it's a sort of like intangible feeling of like how much more time I want to spend, right, in like the strangeness and the kind of like emotional time capsule of that experience, I think is maybe the best way I can put it. But I could easily disavow everything I said tomorrow. You know what I mean? If I sat down to write tomorrow. So I don't really know. I'm curious what it's like for you too.
You're so right. I mean, the interesting thing is that a lot of people in this room have read, been in my workshops and have read different iterations of these poems. I mean, I'm thinking about like the Moses Summy one, which like, thank you so much for what you said, that like fully means the world. Like that poem, the first version of that poem was in a winter class with Professor Bum, actually, who's in the back. Shout out to you. But yeah, it was in a winter class last year, and it got like completely, like it looks completely different now, which like, and same for the Where Are We Going piece of like also like I would need to agree with you. Like I think a lot of it is like, I just kind of, part of it is this like just not looking, but I think one thing that I've been really trying to challenge myself to do, especially when it's so easy to just like, challenge myself, but like with the help of like other like people and writers and people who are close to me, just like noticing when you're like a little bit copping out, like you're just like a little bit copping out of just like saying a line that you've heard before in another poem, of like, you know what I mean? Those moments where you're like, oh, this is just so randomly said, how can I change it? And then it's like, wait, no, like that kind of signals that the poem maybe isn't ready, or like maybe like there needs to be kind of like more digging to be done and stuff. I feel like that's something that I'm really trying to look at with like all that I said today, and then a lot of that I said today, especially the last poem. I'm like, this might not look the same in like a couple of like weeks, months. So like, thanks for everybody for hearing all that.
I think we're out of time, but please come talk to Yazid and Wendy and chat more, and let's have one last round of applause.